Hi guys. So I know I promised to post more videos to this channel as I work on my full tutorial and as we get closer and closer to NEEP. But I do have to admit it's a little hard for this Brooklyn girl to listen to this accent on video. I got a little bit of stage fright, guys. Now, if you ever met me in person, that probably would be surprising because I usually don't have a problem talking. I can talk to the wall, have a nice conversation. But this is a little bit different. So, thanks a lot for bearing with me and having patience. So, this video is all about sizing your image for Painter or actually picking the optimal size image. There's no exact science to it. I just believe that you should work on the largest image you possibly can because painter brushes are dependent on pixels. So the more pixels you give it, the more responsive the brushes are, and I'm going to be demonstrating that. But for now, we're going to go and crop this image 20 by 24, 300 dpi. Most times I'll go 18 by 22 because the majority of my clients order either 16 by 20 or 20 by 24. So that's a nice in between if I wanted to make it a little smaller or a little larger. But in this case, we're just going to go right to 20 by 24. And you'll see that I make sure I pick width and height with resolution because I want to make sure my final 20 by 24 is 300 dpi. If I go into the image size that it is now, and I decide, I'm not going to resample it, and I make it 20 by 26, it'll still be slightly under 200 dpi, and we really do want the highest resolution on this image that we can get. Now, when we're resampling, there's a couple of different ways that we can do it. You see here it says preserve details for enlargement or bicubic smoother for enlargement. I'm going to just pick preserve details, and hopefully that'll keep it as sharp as possible. Now, sometimes when we up resolution an image, we worry about noise. That's really not a factor in an image that's going to go into Painter because we'll just brush right over that noise and it's just a non-issue, so we don't have to worry about that. So I'm going to take my crop tool, and this would be a 20 by 24 crop if I were to leave the image the way it was photographed. The problem is that I think it's a little off kilter. We have my pedestal with the candles, but brother and sister are not equidistant from the edges. So I'm going to take the bounding box and just go a little bit farther than my actual image. And I'm going to show you how I'm going to fix that problem afterwards. So here we have the brother and the sister. They're both this really cool rule of thirds lines that we have now on the crop tool. I could see that they're pretty much evenly spaced from the edge of the frame. So I'm going to click OK, and you see how it jumped forward, and that's because it went up on the resolution. So let me go back. And what do I do about this white strip here? Well, new versions of Photoshop really make this really easy to fix. I'm just going to highlight that box. I'm going to hit the delete key. That brings up my fill dialog box, and I'm going to make sure it says content aware, and I'm going to hit OK. And Photoshop is pretty much going to do the work for me. If I deselect, you'll see that it did a pretty good job filling in that edge. And we're ready to move on to the next step of this tutorial. So here is my brother, sister again. And let's say I love this image. I really wanted to paint it, but all I do is have a copy of it, and it happens to be the copy I sent to my lab. It's 8 by 10. It's only 150 DPI, but I really want to paint it, so I'm gonna go with it. I'm gonna work with it. Okay, so let's try this out. I'm gonna do the same thing I did before. I'm gonna put my brother and sister into the top third and make sure they're equidistant from the edge. The heads, hit OK. Oh, now it pops smaller. You saw that before. It popped bigger. Now it pops smaller, but it's because it's a smaller size image. I'm gonna get my little box here. Hit the delete key, content aware, just as it comes up, hit OK, fills in that spot for me. Got this little white border on the bottom, so we're going to get rid of that. I don't know what that junk is, just make sure it's all clean all around. Okay, and then we're ready to go. And I'm going to save this one as size small. And now we're going to go into Painter. So here we are in Painter with our size small image and size big image, and already you can see a difference in the sharpening. Okay, you lose some of the detail. I know that there's some criticism about Painter making uh, images too smushy, too soft, but when you work on a high resolution image, that can help you get away from a lot of that. Let's start by for example, doing her hair. I'm going to pick my brush called a hair blender, and I have it sized. The average size I use it at is like 10, and I'm going to start stroking her hair. And you can see that at this size, I can still retain some of the highlights in her hair as I'm stroking. You know, if I zoom in closer to show you, you can see that some of her own, even though she has pretty dark hair, some of her own highlights are still being retained with the initial brush stroke. Right there, and maybe this little hair over here, and in here. You can see there's still that quality of individual hair strands, even as I'm blending the hair. So there's a nice difference between it looking painted but also looking realistic and keeping some of that the sharpness to it. So now I'm going to go into my small image here, and I'm going to not going to now first of all, look at the size of my brush. If I was to use the same brush on this image, you're going to get that smeary quality. I'm going to have to make my brush pretty small, especially here on the highlights of her hair. I'm going to have to make my brush pretty small to maybe if I go down to 3 pixels, even down to 3 pixels, I'm still not getting the same quality of stroke out of my brush. Now maybe this is an extreme example. Maybe, I mean, this is an image that's sized 8 by 10 at 150 pixels as opposed to a 20 by 24 image at 300 pixels. So maybe the difference in the sizing is extreme, but I can guarantee you that you'll have the same kind of problem just going maybe from 300 DPI to 200 DPI. The brushes are not going to be as responsive. You're not going to get as good as a result. I'm going to go back to this image. I'm going to make my brush a little larger because, like I said, the brushes themselves work on pixels. They're dependent on pixels. So if they're dependent on pixels, the more pixels you give them, the more responsive the brush is. I can even make this brush small, and I can work on her eyebrows as well. There's no way that I can work on her eyebrows at this size, even if I make the brush, as you can see, one single pixel. And that could be a problem. If you can't get the brush down to 1 pixel, let's go to a liner brush, a detail brush. Here's a detail brush. I'm going to zoom in on her eyes, This is a brush that I use to make eyelashes. I'm going to sample the color of her lash, and then I'm going to just draw a couple of eyelashes out. Now you can see with the detail brush, and then if I zoom back out, I can kind of match the size of her actual eyelashes. And my brush was only 1 pixel. 1 pixel on an image that's very low resolution is going to be huge. It's not going to be the size of an eyelash. So it's always better to work on an image that is size larger than smaller. And I know that on some computers, some may worry that using large size files may cause more crashes in Painter. I don't find this to be the case. I find that the program is pretty stable. If you do have some concern about your computer handling Painter with such a big file, just have a save button handy, and that should avoid any problems you might run into, especially if you paint something important, you like the way it's going. Just hit this little click, little save, and that should prevent you from losing any work as you go along. In my experience, Painter handles large files very well, and as you can see the comparison between the two, this is a very good argument for using the largest size file possible.